don't want to be recorded, you should just turn off your camera so that I mean, I'm not sure how it works in terms of who shows up on the screen. But if you don't want to be recorded, turn off your camera so that you don't appear on the recording. And so first, we'd like to welcome Dr. C. Vernon Gray. I'm sure he is familiar to many, if not most of you. He's a retired professor of political science at Morgan State University and the recent author of a book entitled The Roots of Black Politics in Howard County. Many members probably remember him as the first African-American elected to the Howard County Council. He served an unprecedented 5 terms, including 4 terms as the council chair. And we are really just so thrilled to have him and looking forward to hearing more on his sort of history and perspective on race in Howard County. So we will, I think, have some time after his presentation if people have questions. So if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And with that, Dr. Gray, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you this evening. I want to thank you for the invitation as well. Thank Gabriel for continuing to email me to ensure that I would be here. I said I would, and to each of you, it's good to see you and good to be here to talk with you. What I like to do this evening is to say a few things about 1982. I'm going to come back to that, but at the outset, then I want to give some vignettes of Howard County, sort of historically, and then I want to give the context in terms of my own race, the things that I feel and I felt contributed to my election, or which contribute to create the kind of environment that will allow someone like me to be elected in Howard County in 1982. But just some things, when you run for office, as those who run know, your family and your campaign people try to keep negative things away from you. Because when you're running, you only want to hear, I need to feel something here in front of my screen. I don't know what it is. Just hold on a second. Can everybody see me? There's something, you see something in front of the screen?
Yeah, I'm
there?
sorry, I
Okay.
spotlighted you, sir.
Oh, that's what happened. You only want to hear positive things and things that reinforce your taking that chance to run, because it's not easy. And I always tell people who run for office to put yourself out for public scrutiny. It's difficult for many people. So you want to hear positive things. But I just want to give you about 3 things or so that I heard after the campaign. They didn't tell me this while I was running. So I learned this later from my wife. One of the things that white folks said was, I wouldn't have time to do the job. Some of you run for office, you might have heard that. I wouldn't know what to do. And then I would be trying to run the county. Black people said, whites would be telling me what to do, trying to control me. The woman who said this came from a friend. I'm told by a friend that she told him this, and then later on, when I did some things, I guess, which reaffirmed to her or confirmed to her that I would be my own man, I got the word back that she went and prayed about it, the fact that she had been wrong about what she had said initially. Now, the other thing I want to do here is give a little few vignettes of things, and Marlena will, I know, and I hope she will say some things historical about Howard County. But just a brief thing, some of you might have heard some of this. My second year on the council, a Black gentleman came to me. He had opened a restaurant and he needed some help, Morgan Station Road and Frederick Road. As I got to know him and talk with him, 1983, I think it was, I discovered he had to sign a covenant by all the whites who lived on that street, which would enable him to purchase that property to turn it into a restaurant. I was a little befuddled because I said, now I know the Supreme Court outlawed state restrictive covenants in 1948, for those who want to check the case at Sweat versus Painter. And so it befuddled me. Anyway, that was one of the things that happened here. Some of you might have read about the black and white toilets at the courthouse. Or where the Senator Robert Shipley. Some of you heard of Shipley's Grant, I guess it's called, down there by 108 and where Starbucks is. Well, he told a friend back in the day, so I'll say back in the day, that he was opposed to integration or desegregation. He told my friend, he said, I wouldn't mind sitting in a restaurant having dinner with you, but I don't want sitting with other blacks to have dinner. This person was in the state Senate. Fortunately, Senator Clark ran against him and defeated him, Senator James Clark. Many of you heard about the infamous Amos Bar. Friends would go there and have to go around back. Not unlike the experience I had growing up in Maryland, having to go around back. Also, my maybe second term on the council, I learned of a restaurant or bar up in Sykesville, which would not allow blacks in, or if blacks went there to be seated as customers, they were not. And the restaurant closed down, regardless what time of day it was. If a black walked in, they would close. At 2 o'clock, they would close. 10 o'clock, they would close. 5 o'clock, they would close. And so what I decided to do, I decided to send the police up there to this restaurant, one black, one white police officer. And so, of course, obviously the police officer and similar things happened in plain clothes. Similar thing happened. Now, unfortunately, the bar was closed down because someone was killed there. And so just took the license, they closed. Just a couple other things quickly. Of course, you know about the slave history, which I'm certain maybe Marlene mentioned that. A couple of other things way back there is when I first moved to Howard County, my wife and I were looking for a babysitter, back in '73. And so we just responded to an ad in the paper. So we went to a house up on 103 near Clarksville. Walked up to the door with our daughter. The woman came to the door as we rang the door. She said, "I'm sorry, but I don't sit black kids." Well, we laughed, said to ourselves, "Well, we don't want you to sit our black daughter if you feel that way." And a couple other things. In 1973, my first, I think 6 months I've been on the council, there were a lot of Klan activity in Southern Howard County. There were a lot of recruitment and distribution of Klan literature at the established fire station. And so I put a resolution in to condemn the distribution of the Klan literature and recruitment activities at the fire station. The resolution passed, but only after I accepted the amendment not to name the fire station. And I want to know why. Well, I never got a good reason. But at any rate, you see the resolution there, you will see it does not name the fire station. Some other things which you might have read in history, I'll be brief with this. George Wallace, of course, won Howard County primary in 1968. And he was on the way winning it again in '72 when he was shot in Laurel in 1972. And the last thing I would say, a personal thing, I'm one who tried to give deference and due respect to people who have served office, particularly people who served office to me. In this case, someone who had served office in similar office, the county council. Many of you know when I first ran in '82, I ran countywide. And then in 1986, we had districts. So I knew the county commissioners. I talked with the previous one. And this particular council commissioner, I approached him one day at a function, the Chamber of Commerce, to speak to him and say, "Hello, I'm running for office now. I'm not in office, I'm running." So no, it had to be before '82. It wasn't '82. So I extended my hand to shake his hand, to greet him, and he refused to do so. His wife go to him and said, "Why don't you shake the man's hand?" He refused to do so. So I said, "Fine." And I said, "Okay, you do not want to shake my hand. What I'm going to do, I'm gonna stand here and talk. Now you can walk away or you can listen, but I'm gonna talk to you." And so every time after that, when I went to the event, I saw him, he would never shake my hand, but I would go up to him and talk. He didn't have to listen, he'd walk away. But that was my way to deal with that situation. Now, you must remember in 1982, a lot of things were happening in Howard County around the country. This is part of the context I want to talk about. Things that were happening coincident to my run in 1982, or just before. Now, at that time, Howard County population was 88% white, 12% Black, compared to Howard County population now, which is, if it's non-Hispanic whites, 48% or so, and if you include Hispanic whites, about 54%, African Americans, 20%, and Asian would be about 19, 20% as well here in the county today, 334,000 people. But one of the things, there was a structural change in the county in 1969. Remember, the county had been a county commissioner from its founding in 1850, when, as Marlene would tell you, there were most enslaved people than free Blacks. And been county commissioner, it only white men had served. But in 1969, with the coming of Columbia, which I'll say a little more about that, there was needed a structural change to accommodate the increasing responsibilities of the county, increasing functions that would accompany that change of Columbia with expected population of 100,000 people. And county went to a county executive, 5 council member form of government. So we had that, it was in place when I ran. In addition to that, I think it was in 1974, the county elected, I think, 2 women to the county council. And I bring that up because you look at those things that is changing environment, obviously with the coming of Columbia, because you're dealing with a county which had about 30-some thousand people in 1960, a little over that, 1970, but in 1982, we're talking about 118,000 people in the county, of which about 13,000 or so were Black. As 12% of the county made what I'm talking about here. And so I think that the arrival of Columbia aided or accelerated or pushed, you might say, the change in the structure of the county, but also assisted with for the first time, 2 women being elected to the county council, Ruth Keaton and Jenny Thomas. You know, in 1963, many of you know the history, the Rouse Company had purchased over 15,000 acres to build this new town. And the first village was, of course, Town Center, a new town which would, with its own philosophy of diversity, inclusion, opportunity, a town which Rouse would want people of all races, culture, religions to move here and live here in harmony. Now, Rouse obviously did this, began his push prior to the passage of the 1968 Fair Housing Act, which prohibited discrimination in the sale and rental, et cetera, of housing in the United States. Now, I always kid people, say maybe he was having atonement because he was involved in this segregation of houses in Roland Park in the early 50s. And so that you might have some turnaround based on that. But I think the fact that you had Columbia here with his philosophy, and so you had people moving to Columbia who were wedded to his philosophy, who accepted the mission and vision of Columbia. And hopefully you had others who may not have shared that vision when they moved here, but what I call transplantation, they transformed, they changed their ideas, you know. And we're seeing that now, if we look around, we're seeing some rumblings of dissatisfaction or disagreement or differences with some of the vision that Rouse had for this town. Another thing that was happening was the whole civil rights movement, in which we were coming off the heels of the civil rights movement, in which people were now trying to move from protest to politics. And that's what we were told, to get involved in politics. So we saw this all around the country. We saw the mayors being elected in Cleveland, Newark, and New Jersey, Carl Stokes, Ken Gibson, Richard Hatcher, who I know as a friend. And then in Baltimore, we saw even Baltimore in 72, we had election there. 2 Blacks ran and Donald Schaefer ran in 1972. Clarence Mitchell ran, George Russell ran. And of course, they split the vote, and William Schaefer went on to become mayor of Baltimore, and many of you know the rest is history because he served for 16 years before going on to the governorship. And so those are the kind of things that are happening. But the main thing I think that accelerate this pace to someone like me being elected to the county was that additional African Americans moving into Howard County, into Columbia. Many Blacks who lived in Baltimore City moved here. Many at other cities, they moved here. They heard about Columbia. They moved here. And once African Americans began to reside in Columbia, they began to replicate the Black organizations and fraternities to which they belonged. Black churches began to form. And so we had this taking place here. And in 1978, I was part of a group we formed called ATTAC, Alliance Towards Active Community, a group of African Americans who were interested in the political system to change what was taking place here. Now, I cannot discount the fact that Blacks had run before I had run. And that is in 1952, for example, Lewis Kelly ran for the House of Delegates. And a number of Blacks had run for county council, orphans court, and the Register of Wills before I ran. It was Jim King had run, Leola Dorsey, Reverend Howland, all had run before, but they'd run as Republicans with a small natural base. But the fact is that I mentioned the African American movement here that created that optimum base for me, which enabled that to run. And then in 1978, Ethel Hill ran for the school board, which was the first race I got involved in Howard County. And she ran again in 1980. She was unsuccessful, but she was successful in the sense that a number of African Americans got involved in her campaign. And of course, the what I call political consciousness began to increase. And in 1982, myself and Bill Manning was elected to the school board. I was elected to the county council. He was elected to the school board. As I pointed out, I ran on a countywide basis. I have 10 to 15 minutes, so I'm not going to go through all of the other stuff. But the other thing I should point out, the first African American elected to the Democratic Central Committee in Howard County was Maggie Brown and E. Marie Johnson. And Pam Johnson was elected again in '86 to the Democratic Central Committee. 3 Black African American women who were elected. Now, I've come from the farm. I grew up on the farm. My grandfather was a sharecropper, and he was able to get enough money, 1944, to purchase quite a few acres, maybe 100 acres or so of this particular farm for about $800. And of course, the house I grew up in was a house that was built with wood off the land, 5-room house. We had about, looked like 15 people living in that house. But that's where, but my family always been sort of active. So since about 8, 9 years old, I began going to political events, at least not events, going to political rallies and to the voting place. So that's why I got my passion for becoming involved in politics. And so last thing about Columbia, then I'm gonna get into one other thing, is that there's one thing about running. And at that time, we called it a biracial environment. Now it's multiracial. The important thing is developing coalitions. And I was able to develop coalition and endorsements. Those were key to my running. Because when I ran in 1982, I ran countywide, and I was able to join a ticket with 3 incumbents. I came first in all the, I came in 4th in that race of the 10 people who were running countywide for the county council. It becomes a very important coalition building. I don't take the position, as I was told during the campaign, white people are not going to vote for you. I don't take that position. I take the position that I'm going to try to be the best candidate I can be, do what I can, and let the chips fall where they may. But there's one thing you have to have if you run. You have to have patience. You have to have faith, resiliency. You have to have confidence in yourself. You have to be optimistic, and you have to be perseverance. I'm not going to explain those things, but that's what you need to see. I don't personally look at everyone as they're racist. You have to prove to me that you're anti-Black or you're racist. I can read all I want to read, but in a person basis, you have to demonstrate certain things to me. But I was able to become part of a ticket as well, because Howard County at that time had 2 branches of the Democratic Party, what I call the liberal branch, conservative branch. Senator Clark and Hugh Nixon was part of the conservative branch. CDC was the leader of the liberal branch of the party. And so I joined that particular branch of the party, which enabled me to win office. And each election I ran after the 1982, I ran head to head with another person, Democrat, in the primary, and I was able to win 2-1 in each of those elections. I was unopposed in 1990 in that election. But the thing about you have to do, that I should have timed myself, is that being the first is not always easy, because it's very difficult to convince someone you can do something that never been done before. You have to let people know, try to encourage them to have confidence, to have faith that it can be done. You have to have faith, and you have to demonstrate that to them, that you have faith, that you believe that you can win. But anyone who have run know that to be the case. Now, one last thing I want to point out, which has dismayed me in this county, and this is when we get to part of racism, because I've talked about this quite a bit in the last few weeks to people. I talked with the county executive I met with him within the last week or two, and I told him one thing that needs to be done in this county. People have to come together, the various groups, and address the issue of racism in this county. You can call it subterranean racism, but that has to be addressed, because what happened in 2019 with the efforts to reapportion the schools was something which really shocked me to the core. I saw this, I said, no, this cannot be Boston with Louise Day Hicks, South Boston. Some of you may remember that. But what happened, the county council in 2019 put a resolution in CR 112. And this is what they said. They said, we want the school system to draft, approve, and implement a lawful multi-year integration plan to ensure that the Howard County Public Schools are integrated by socioeconomic factors. And why did they do that? Because that unleashed all kinds of racism, and you name it. I mean, you saw it, you witnessed it, you probably have an opinion on it. But I want to end with a few of these things that were said, and then we'll come back to it. One of the things that was said, and I should say, I showed this to a friend of mine this morning, to a white female, and she started crying. I looked up, I couldn't believe it. She was crying when she read this stuff. This morning. It said, blacks destroy schools, systems and schools. Black families don't value education like other cultural groups. The Black community needs to take responsibility for the behavior of their people, or the white man will take them back to places where they don't want to go. Now, this was the county council, 2019. This is some of the testimony that was before the county council. Some of you might have heard this. Some of you might not have. Say it's not racism, talking about ruined school. It's lazy, good for nothing blacks that have ruined Columbia. And I could go on and on. Some of you are familiar with it. I mean, this is from some of the letters and testimony before the county council in 2019. That's what we have to address. And hopefully we'll continue to talk about that a little later on. So thank you very much. And we will get back to that discussion. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gray. And yes, I mean, I think a lot of us really, remember that 2019 school redistricting, both, there was testimony like that before both the council as well as before the Board of Education. And it was incredibly upsetting and shows how far we still have left to go. So if you are able to stay with us, Dr. Gray, I think what we'd like to do is hear first from Marlena and then do questions for both of you at the end. Okay, fantastic. All right, terrific. So our next speaker then, we have Marlena Giroux, who is a historian and researcher, and she's a founding member and the executive director of the Howard County Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Project. She's also currently serving as co-chair of the Howard County Public Facilities and Spaces Report Evaluation and Action Commission, which is charged with making recommendations regarding possible changes to names of local public facilities and spaces based on community feedback. And so we look forward to hearing from her about some of her work and some of her thoughts on kind of the history of race in Howard County. So Marlena, I will hand it over to you, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dawn, and also Linda and Tina Horn. I don't think she's on here, but that's how I got the invite. So thanks for having me. Well, there's certainly a lot that I can say. I guess I'll start by just saying that thanks for the introduction. But just a little bit of history, if you may indulge me, is that in 2019, there was a resolution to the General Assembly, Maryland General Assembly, to create a statewide commission that was going to basically be tasked with supervising the generation of content of historical data, and also conduct hearings in all of the Maryland jurisdictions in which a lynching was known to have occurred. And boy, I knew, before it even got signed by the governor, I knew that in this county, I just knew that. I said, oh gosh, I can't wait to see how our county's going to do with this. And so all I needed to do was really just look on social media, and I captured actually a lot of through screenshots to see some of the thoughts and what people were saying. And oh my gosh, and I'm not talking about things that were said by people that were just random Facebook accounts. Some of these people were actually like in positions of I'll just say positions of authority, that were articulating viewpoints that were just really just quite shocking. Because for anybody that really is involved or has been watching any of the stuff, if you know anything about Equal Justice Initiative, et cetera, then you know that one of the things that here we are now in 2023, we have to examine and look at people from a different standpoint and a different perspective, I think, than how many people have done in history and continue to do so. And what I mean by that is compassion. There's a little word called compassion. The fact of the matter is, I see people all the time, they just rush to judgment for things. It was said when the announcement came out that there was going to be this commission in Howard County, everybody then wondered, oh, what's going to happen in Howard County? Are we going to do this? And there were people that were just saying like, oh, well, let me just tell you what happened. Okay, so Nicholas Snowden, he did something to a little girl, and his own race came and took care of the problem and lynched him and took care of it. And then Jacob Henson Jr., he, killed a white shop owner. And then they lynched him. So he got what he's coming. Okay, there, done. And then they said, for this, we need a commission. And my gosh, if only life were really that simplistic. And of course, things aren't really ever quite so simplistic. So that's how we came and how I got into the fray here in the county. I just knew, and I saw what was happening. I saw that what was going to happen was that this county, I knew it from various people that I'm not going to name, who had positions of authority. I saw how they were basically trying to sweep it under the rug. They were all basically saying that, oh, well, no, you don't really even need to come to Howard County at all, because we don't, we have Columbia. And that's what people do all the time. Yeah, but we're Columbia. We have Columbia, Rouse, diversity, kumbaya, everything. There's nothing to see here. Nobody complains here. We don't have any issues, everything. And my family came here. I'm born in '67. So when I was born, my parents couldn't legally get married, everything. I have a white mother and a black father, and they could not legally get married until the Loving case, happened. My family moved here to Columbia when I was in high school. And I thought I was moving to a place that had, for all that diversity and this and that, melting pot and all these other things that I heard went to Wild Lake High School, and that's where I'm a graduate of. But my gosh, coming back here and then being here as an adult, raising my son here, he's 26 now. Now he moved out. He's in DC now. Trying to do history here in Howard County. My gosh, in the history circles, I got to tell you, and I say this all the time, Howard County reminds me of the Eastern Shore. I've spent time on the Eastern Shore. I spent time with people that do history in the Eastern Shore, And there's a certain mentality that is there in the Eastern Shore. And I'm going to tell you, Howard County, I don't care how progressive, and there are many things that are progressive about Howard County and maybe just really just Columbia, everything else. And then there is like the people that actually have had the power for the longest time to tell historical narratives. And like it or not, those historical narratives are the things that our kids are hearing. That leads to beliefs, that leads to, ways of, thoughts, ways of interacting with people, thoughts of superiority, thoughts of privilege, thoughts of, you name it. That's where it comes from, also from home life too, but it's also being perpetuated by what it is that we're hearing and what we all grow up hearing about history. So I'll tell you that some of the things, again, as Dr. Gray said, yes, in vein with it in terms of the nonprofit that we formed. And frankly, we formed it because we were having battles. It's history. We were having battles in this county. We still do. We have battles in this county regarding history and accurate history, which I am a researcher. I leave no stone unturned. And that was in many ways is just not welcomed. And that probably is surprising some people. It surprised me when it was first happening. Now I'm used to it. So I have things going on as the executive director of the nonprofit. Whereas when we are telling things that are designed, they are very calculated and designed to uplift and tell the story from the Black experience. What was it like here in our county? We have a significant population of free Blacks. In this county, I gave a presentation earlier today at the Miller Library on free Blacks before 1850 that were living here to help to counteract some narratives that people's just false myths that are in this county that are about history that are disempowering myths to Black people. It's just disempowering. So yes, I do things like that and roll it all the way back to the time of slavery, but that's not all that we do. I spent a tremendous amount of time actually looking at and pulling primary source documents to see really a lot more information about what this county was doing and what was really going on here at the time that desegregation was mandated by Brown versus Board of Education. And oh my gosh, I think the records that are sitting down at the Maryland State Archives that I took photos of and captured over the last couple of weeks. It's quite amazing to see some of the decisions that were made, who was making them, because they had the power to make them, why it looked like they were making them, and et cetera. So as was said, yes, I am one of the co-chairs that's doing the new iteration of basically a public spaces commission, essentially. We are examining the names that are found on various buildings. We were supposed to also do streets, schools, everything that has a name. But this county, that's the thing, Howard County, there is so much stuff from Howard County that's actually named for stuff during the time of plantations being here. And people just don't even know it. There were a lot of agreements that were made by Rouse when he went around town, purchasing all this land unbeknownst to so many people and gobbling it up to create Columbia. There were agreements that were put into place with some of the people where they said, can you please keep this, but keep this with the name, make you promise me that you'll do this. And Rouse held to those promises. So despite the fact that we have Columbia, we also have this place in which all around, for those of us who know, there are all these places that are actually named for plantations and so forth and the like, because this county did have a significant slave population here in the county, which every time I go and talk, that seems to just blow people's mind. They just had, because everybody's so concentrated on Columbia, and oh, it's new and this, that, and the other, that people, I think people forget that Columbia is located in Howard County. It's not the Columbia of, the county of Columbia. It is Howard County that happens to have Columbia in it. And so there are all these things that are outside of Columbia that are steeped in history that have never changed. And it literally is like circling and like all surrounding Columbia, which is this new thing. They're relatively new, but yet has these old names that pay homage to back in the slavery time. So to see when our organization, our commission pushed out the first of our reports, which was the report on the 4 governor buildings that is now accessible for people to see. We pushed it out, our commission, a few months ago. We are getting ready to release the one on the library, on all the libraries in the county. It actually was supposed to go out today. I don't know what is the holdup and why, but we are getting this, and we are hearing loud and clear that there are people, so many people in this county, that don't want to actually hear about this history. They don't want it stirred up. They don't want it talked about. We hear things about, oh, you're cancel culture, you're doing this. And I hear critical race theory things all the time. I have gotten threats through email. I've gotten threats on social media. I've gotten people asking me if I'm a patriot because of me trying to put forth correct, accurate history based on primary source documents to eliminate the myths so that we're all talking about truth. And for that, I get called all kinds of names. And so I could appreciate that Dr. Gray was talking about things and what was being called, in 70s, 80s, and so forth. I mean, I just heard just a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to say who it is because I just don't find it helpful to name names. But I wish it would change. But I've been referred to as the Black Devil here by the county, by personnel that are actually county employees. Have been referring to me, feel comfortable enough to refer to me as the Black Devil. And that is our county. So I guess in wrapping up, I'll say, I knew that when we were, even with doing this commission, I could see when the naming of these buildings got done. We were very methodical in leaving no stone unturned to get the story for what happened. And clearly what I could see happening was that while Columbia was coming, and when Rouse was trying to make his way through, I have all that stuff. And when he was trying to make through, in the county council and being in front of the planning board and doing this and that and being rejected and declined by this, and he had problems with this person trying to block him and all this other stuff. Well, so then I think that was what it seems like was going on. There was this faction then of people that were here that resented the new coming here, and this diversity and so forth, and this new way of life. And I don't know, it just seems to me that, I know that a lot of people are still alive from that time period because I encountered them, good and bad. I get approached by people who tell me there are elder Black folks in Howard County that if the county says that there is going to be an event held at the George Howard building, they refuse to attend because that's their way of feeling like they're protesting because they don't like that it was named for George Howard, the building. And so I get it from both sides and everything else. I hear it from white people that are just, who just want to approach and think that they call me all sorts of things, despite the fact that my mother's Black, my mother's white, everything. I guess it just doesn't matter, everything. So I get it from all sides, but really we're just trying to tell the history. But that's how I guess I've come to the feeling after time and time again of the experiences that I've been having in just trying to do something that frankly, I thought a lot of people didn't really like history. I thought people didn't really like history in school. But people are really very, about their history, and that's fine. But primary source documents is what we use, everything, to have things be right, everything. And I just really think, and that's I think what I wanted to convey in closing out here, from someone who lived in Columbia. I went to Dasher Green Elementary School for a time, Owen Brown Middle School, Wild Lake High School. And then my son came back, went to Appleton Elementary School, Appleton Middle School, and oh gosh, what's his high school? Everything, but anyway, he went away to College Park School of Business, and now he just left. But I have a longtime person here of Columbia, and Highland, area too, where I've lived. And there's a long way, there really is a long way to go. But I think that part of the problem is that things are really just routinely pushed under the rug. I think some things, the can has been kicked down the road for decades and for generations. And I saw it coming out when we discovered our nonprofit and did the history and found out about that the log cabin on Main Street, one of the most recognizable historic properties besides the B&O Railroad, in Ellicott Mills, when we discovered that the true accurate history that it was actually Black history, long time before the Civil War, Black history that basically that Thomas Isaac bought out of a historic Black neighborhood. The response that we got from that was just really quite interesting. There was a lot of Black people who were like, wow, thank you so much, and everything's so appreciative. And then they had all these other, and there's all these other folks that they're just like, they are having a time of it. They are not happy at all, everything stuff. So I guess that's what I have to say, everything about it. So I hope I've covered what the topic was supposed to be, that I was supposed to talk about, but and I'm sure I'll answer any questions that anybody has of if I didn't, they want me to expand upon anything. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and for just the important work that you're doing. It's really, it's incredibly important. And it, I mean, it's interesting to me that, there's this sort of national movement that wants to sort of brush real history under the rug. And as you said, kind of at the beginning of your remarks, we feel like we're immune, or a lot of people think that, we're immune to that kind of thing here in our little bubble, and clearly we're not. So, I mean, it's really important work that you're doing. Do people, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anyone has a question that you want to either put in the chat or raise your hand, we'd love to take questions. One thing, all right, well, Kelly says she's got a question. Do you want to unmute, Kelly, and you can ask?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much, Dr. Gray and Ms. Giroux. I really appreciate just your wisdom and your experience, both of you. I'm a high school teacher, and I think, as teachers, we've been going through this experience these last several years of having our work very attacked by the right, and our teaching of real history and real literature attacked, really ceaselessly. But the really interesting thing is that I feel we don't do a very good job of teaching history and teaching history comprehensively. I teach 12th grade English, and I just finished studying the autobiography of Malcolm X with my students. And one of the things I learned, and this is my first year in teaching in Howard County. I've been teaching in Baltimore City for a long time. And one of the things I learned as we were reading this book is that so many of my students don't have, even though they're in the 12th grade, don't have a really, really deep understanding of America's civil rights history, and much less any understanding of Maryland's history and Howard County's history. And it's the right is fighting against us teaching real history, and we don't, in fact, teach our history well at all. Yeah. And so I guess I'm asking, what can we, even just on a local level, do in order to help our kids and help our teachers teach this very, very rich history that we have available here? And how can we, I'm thinking about resource speakers, because we have folks like you here. How do we bring you into our classrooms? How do we get our kids out into this community to learn these really important lessons? And how do we start doing it very quickly? Because our kids are in school for a very short period of time. And I feel the urgency every day and every year.
I'm sure.
I would say the first thing that you and others can do is to be vigilant. And what I mean by that is to ensure that the school board is not forced into adopting policies which restrict what teachers can teach. Discretionary things you might want to teach. We just saw recently where the Baltimore County, I think the school board banned a couple of books, Lawn Boy and Queer, or something like that. I think we've seen this, but this is not a new movement. Years ago, Virginia wrote a history book, and they left out the whole slave period of enslaved people, until the people rose up in arms and it changed. The new governor just recently set up what's called a standards committee, common standards committee on teaching in the schools. Now we sort of know where he's coming from, But I think we need to do that. Teachers have to have some discretion in what they teach to their kids. Now, I've often said we have a Western civilization approach to education in this country, and I went through that, I didn't know about the Black authors. I never had them. I knew more about Shakespeare and folks like that, and I knew anyone else when I went to school. But I think you have to do that, you see, and show that, because there is an incipient movement in this county to do those kinds of things. In fact, there was a couple of meetings last year held by the woman who was on the ticket with Cox, he ran for governor, she ran for lieutenant governor. She was the one who chaired the school board in Queen Anne's County that ran the Black superintendent out of town. I can't remember her name. But anyway, so that's the thing you have to do. And then I would say, then be certain that you educate yourself first. You cannot teach other people what's going on until you educate yourself. And each of us has stereotypes, so we have to dress ourselves first. I always say we have to deconstruct and then reconstruct our own, because I read a little bit, I have had prejudices, I guess I've had sexist notions, so I've had to constantly deconstruct my own thinking, my own ideology, all of that, and then reconstruct myself in terms of how I approach things. And then I try to educate other people, because when I hear people saying things, prejudice things or bias things, but other people think, I try to correct them. That's not my experience, and I try to educate them. But teachers can do that first of all. But let me tell you, now this is my story. I've been on this since way back. I joined even before I joined the council, because I give Mike Hickett credit for opening up principalship for Black people, because there are only 2 Black principals when I joined the council. But what concerns me, and I've told my Moderana the same thing too, is that we have to look at who we recruit and who we hire. Now, this month there's a recruitment for Black teachers and people of color to come teach in Howard County. But many times we have teachers who attend, of course, the white schools. They do their teacher training in white schools, and then they want to come to Howard County. Salaries is good, starting salaries, all that good environment to come, and boom, there are a lot of African Americans and other people around the world in their classes, and that's not part of the experience. And so they have to be trained, educated on that in order to be able to, select the correct books, say correctly, educate people in a way that we live in a multicultural, multi-racial society.
I have a little bit of a different answer. Well, maybe not even a little bit of a different answer. It's probably categorically a different answer. So one of the things that that anyone who knows me or gets to know me is going to understand very quickly is that, I know that we are a county. We obviously, we're in, whether you live in Columbia, you might live in Columbia, that's in Howard County, that's in the state of Maryland, that's on the East Coast, that's part of the Mid-Atlantic, that's in the United States and so forth. But I focus on what's going on here, right in the area. I am aware that there's these external influences and things of possibilities and stuff that can happen, but I pay attention and zoom into what I see is going on here and whether something is a threat or it's not. To answer your question, I am aware, my understanding is that in the Howard County school system, the teachers do have some flexibility already. They do have some flexibility in what it is that they are able to do in the county. And so I'll give you an example. Last year, our nonprofit partnered with 2 high schools, Appleton High School and Howard High School. And the 1867 slave schedule, it was a slave compensation list, really. Those people in Howard County that wanted to place their names on a list, which was to express their desire to be financially compensated for their perceived financial losses due to slavery ending in the county. That list was sitting at the Maryland State Archives and was just like in PDF form, which makes it really difficult for researchers such as myself and whatever to actually, you have to look through every single page, you just have to read the whole thing. I had worked with 2 high school classes, therefore, in these 2 schools to get that list transcribed. And oh my goodness, the talks, that experience for those 2 schools, these two teachers, somebody would have to talk to them to ask if they needed permission. I did not get the perspective, the understanding, and thought that they thought that they needed permission. And in fact, it was some point afterwards when we were closing, finished, because of what the students were saying about it, they got it and they could see. And then they started wondering, well, I saw this name. Is this the name that's on that building, such and such? And whatever they wanted. Oh my gosh, is that my high school? Is that my? And so the kids had all these questions. It sparked so much stuff, positive stuff in the schools. And then the two teachers just happened to mention it to their principals and everything else, and the social studies researching. Next thing you know, it turned into this big thing where then they were coming around to come and, see the kids in action. And they were just so happy about it and so appreciative. I guess my point is that I didn't hear that that was a problem in any way, shape, or form. We all are aware, and we see the news on Twitter, whatever else, and everything, for what might be going on, and the attack on AP, such and such, and Florida's doing this with their schools and whatever else. But I think that to answer your question for what teachers and what people can do, I think just keep up the pressure and just keep on doing. If it can be done, if I'm right about this, and there is no impediment here, and that teachers can do that on their own, and everything else, and incorporate that because there's some flexibility, then do it, because that'll be the pressure and that'll be the thing that helps to push it and everything to make it so that something like that does not happen in this county. I'd be really surprised if it did. I mean, I hear the talk, but those are the people who feel so emboldened to be able to say something on social media, that are doing the talking and doing the commenting and everything. But I don't think something like that would ever pass here. But the best way to make sure that something isn't is to make it be known just how much it really is valued. Accurate history, though, is the thing. And again, we do have a problem in this county with inaccurate history that has been uplifting the wrong stories and the wrong narratives. But I will tell you that I convened just a few weeks ago, we had a first ever local history summit that I called as an ED of our nonprofit. A summit of all the history organizations. There are 6 of us who are doing history in the county. And we got together and we've agreed that we're going to be meeting quarterly. We had the first one, we didn't kill each other, everything. And so we were all on our best behavior and we were nice to each other. And we collectively talked about the problems that we saw, and we all conceded that we were able to see, which is a huge step, everything. And then we agreed to meet again, which was another huge step, because that implies that we're all in agreement that we're all going to collectively work to try to change this so that the kids, so that the adults, so that our visitors to our county can have accurate history instead of these myths. So I hope I've answered your question, or the both of us together have.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'd love for you to come visit my classroom.
Well, you've see the phone. You have my first name,
I
Marlena.
do.
Just use Marlena at hocoltr.org. And
You
that's
will be getting an email from me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelly.
So Marlena, can you tell us, I know like your organization is a nonprofit, like what can we, what can we do to support that work?
Well, it's always, support for a nonprofit is in many forms. I love being asked to come places. So thanks again, Kelly. I'm thanking you in advance. We love being useful. We love feeling like we love knowing that people care about what it is and that they value it. Our biggest thing is really just been getting our foot in the door and letting people know that we're here and that we are valued. So we currently have a fundraiser. It's a book fundraiser, so you do get something out of it, everything. But it is a book that really is designed to show people exactly how this group of researchers, in which I was one of them, went through the process of actually going through and combing through records in order to try to get at the truth. Now I'm mentioning this and this book not just because, of course, it's going to give some money to us and everything else, but also to Kelly's point for what she was kind of speaking about schools and about the attacks and so forth. The thing is that I will tell everybody what I see very clearly, and we discussed it at the summit too. Kids at schools aren't learning critical thinking skills. they just really just, it's in decline, critical thinking skills. So the ability to evaluate a source and to be able to evaluate what it is that you're really looking at and consuming and then taking as truth. I mean, there's a huge problem with this, and it's on decline. But it's because critical thinking skills just are not. It's not being taught in schools quite the way that it was before. This book and what it is that we've put in there to really show people, and that's adults too, frankly, how we went through this and module by module is as articulated book is something that we want to get into all the schools. We want to have a hardback copy of it in every single high school library and in each of the county libraries. So on the website, there is a fundraiser, a link to it, which allows people, you can buy a hardcover copy for yourself, a soft cover for yourself, or there's these various other funding levels that'll say, like, if you're interested, which I'm hoping to spend the rest of the month doing fundraising, to see if I can blow it out and get some really good, hopefully decent donors who will agree to go at the top levels, so that it will get a certain number of books also into the school system. Which I mean, this phenomenal story of these these African Americans who were living in our county well before the Civil War and everything. They were yeah, I mean, it's it's local history for people that actually resided here, as opposed to Harriet Tubman, there is no evidence to suggest that Harriet Tubman came through our county. There's none. She always came back for a purpose. She always came back when she came to get somebody. It was always a family member and then some extra ones. There were no family members of hers here in our county. And geographically, there's just no good reason. There is nothing for where her people have mapped that through the years for where it is that she went and routes and so forth and everything. She just didn't come here and everything. So, it's Harriet Tubman is a great person to, I love Harriet Tubman too. Same with Frederick Douglass. I made the discovery a few years ago that Frederick Douglass had come here to speak in Howard County. That wasn't known before, everything else. But there are these other people who actually boots on the ground lived here that we really want to uplift. People like Hezekiah Brown, who our nonprofit calls he was actually the first integrator of schools here in Howard County, when he dared to teach a poor white woman's son in the school in which he came here to teach in 1884, when he was teaching here. Unfortunately, when he was talking with the parent, I phrase it as like a parent-teacher conference and everything else, the people in that part of the county, they just were not having it. They were pissed. They were upset. They were outraged and everything else. And it was also the year that Frederick Douglass got married to a white woman. And the villagers they lost their minds and everything else. They threatened to lynch him and then reported widely to the newspaper that they lynched him, when in fact they had to issue a retraction days later. They never lynched him. So it's if I always say, therefore, people value local, document primary source that actually gets your kids and gets people involved in actually getting back in touch with critical thinking skills and looking at sources so that you can see what it is, then please consider supporting our nonprofit, to help us. Everything else to keep on.
One thing you said about critical, I read a study here recently which says that critical thinking went out I think 2010, it said, when most schools became technologically, I guess efficient and all that, and cursive writing went out and all that stuff. So there, what your critical writing, I don't know what study it is, but I just read that within the last month or so. But you're absolutely right in terms of critical thinking skills.
Yeah. We're going to put, and I'll maybe Dawn, maybe you'll circulate around after this, because it's not up yet. But like I said, I just gave a talk earlier today for an hour and a half on Free Blacks. I'm going to be posting that video. I did record it, and I did verify that it actually did record, thank goodness. But I'm going to be putting that on our YouTube channel and everything else. And I just invite, it really is something to see. And I think it really does help people to see and to reframe some narratives and understand. Chris, history has always been power. That's the thing too.
Well,
as I say, usually it's been that whoever wins, the victor is the one who gets to tell the stories and so forth.
Yeah, that's right.
What they always say. everything
Just-
else. But we're trying to change that. It wasn't just that. I've come to find out here in Maryland, that wasn't the problem with history. There was a concerted effort through history in this county and in Maryland too, to uplift certain types of history and to mute other history and everything. It is well documented, everything. And so that's what we're still trying to fight. So if you care about that, please, I would ask.
Well, just
think
as a side, we see Thomas Edison name written on everything as responsible for the light bulb, but it was not Thomas Edison, but his name's on it. It was Lewis Latimer. Lewis Latimer had worked for Alexander Graham Bell, and we know his story, and he could not get the filament to work. And so he talked to Graham Bell, I'll call him. He said, look, I have a person over here who probably could help you. He went over to help Edison to keep the filament burning. Edison didn't know how to keep it burning, so it was Lewis Latimer. But most people think it was Edison.
Yeah.
Dr. Gray, we do have a question in the chat from Liz wondering where she can buy your book.
Oh, just send me my address, cvgray2comcast.net.
All right. Thank you.
I'm revising it, and I've also written quite a few pages on the memoir. I have a chapter on the Ku Klux Klan story that I mentioned in that.
Great.
And see, I'm going to say, just to piggyback off that for a second, there are people, I call them the people who've always had the power to tell the stories. They had people I've heard before the commission started, before our nonprofit. I've walked into meetings before, history things before in our county, in which it was said by people who had the power, who said that there was never, the Klan was never here in Howard County.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have
it's
some. I have
so
some
demoralizing.
I have some I have some of the literature here. But Gorman, you mentioned Warfield. Now, Warfield was a governor in 1903. Warfield was one who joined with Arthur Gorman. Gorman wrote. Arthur Gorman didn't want racist all he could be, but he was power in the Maryland Senate. He was considered the boss down there, but he wanted to disfranchise the blacks. He put an amendment in to say blacks, that people with low economic status wouldn't be able to vote, and the literacy test. All that was put in. The 1867 Constitution deliberately excluded black males from voting. And then that changed with the 15th Amendment, we know, in 1871, a few years later. But the Warfields, as you said, was with over almost 300 owners of enslaved people here in the county. O'Regan Manor, with
But that's the Carrolls.
Yeah,
That's
Carrolls.
the
They're one
Carroll
of the
family
biggest,
and
the
everything.
biggest
But
slave.
yeah, a lot of that history is in our report. The first,
Right.
the first four
Right.
governors
Yeah.
report that's sitting on our website. People should see it.
They were the biggest, owners of enslaved people. Oakdale is called Oakdale, but if you go down to Harry Tubman's, they call it something else. The Oakdales were the Warfields. And they just sold it. That property just sold last year. It called it a mansion, something mansion. The first thing I thought, that was the plantation, River Hill. You could go on and on about that. The people may not think that Maryland. They call Maryland a free state, but I grew up in the county, Calvert County, which has the largest number of enslaved people in the state of Maryland. And the people who were in the 1600s, people who were enslaved in Maryland, were some people call them the Chesapeake slaves. They were considered by people in the South to be, quote unquote, the best slaves. And so men that went down to South Carolina, North Carolina, end up in New Orleans in many cases.
So if people are interested in learning more about the Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Project, Linda has put the link in the chat, and so you can find out more about the organization and more about the fundraiser. And I think maybe someone has a motion.
Well,
Yeah.
In support of this effort and Marlena's work, and in gratitude for her being with us tonight, I would like to make a motion. There is a level of support for the book fundraiser called the Educator Ally, which is a $250 level, which would get 10 books for our Howard County Public Schools. And maybe we could even talk them into switching that out so that all the books go to the Howard County Public Schools and we can all buy our own personal copies elsewhere. So I'd like to make a motion that the club make that donation. Do I hear a second?
Second, that's Kelly.
All right.
Oh, thank you guys.
Sure. And so, Linda, do you have a poll for this, or should we just do a
You can
voice
put up
vote?
a poll. We have a poll. So
Okay.
If you are a member, the poll will just ask whether or not you support the motion as I made it. Is there any discussion before we vote? Did anyone have anything to say? Bob gave us the treasurer's report earlier, so we do have the money in our coffers.
Linda, this is Sue. Can I ask a question? Wouldn't
Sure.
wouldn't the books get more use in the library than the school system? Or could we do half and half or both?
We are gonna get books in. I'll tell you what, if you want to be, I can make arrangements, because I can do whatever I want with it. I can make arrangements to go ahead and work out something and see how many books. I just have to look and see what the gross of the book thing, to see how many of them, of the hardback one. We really wanted, because it's going to go into schools, we just wanted it will last longer, we feel, if the hardback editions in schools. So to get maybe one hardback in each school, high schools is what we were talking about. I can run what those numbers are and everything and see at that donation level to see and verify that I can allocate that $250 donation can quite possibly maybe, and then I would just shift some language on the remainder of the
Yeah, we could
fundraiser, just say that we already have that covered and still encourage people to
Or
get
we
it into
could-
the for
We
kids.
could make it just you do with the money what you think is best to get your message across. I don't know. Liz, you had a comment too. I'm sorry. Liz has her hands up.
Thanks. Sorry. Okay, so I clicked the link and went to the website, and I'm looking for where to, like, if I wanted to take this to a different group for money. I see the donate section.
I had to, Liz, I looked it up by going into the newsletter and blog area, and then it was listed there and the link was there.
Okay.
We have,
Oh,
what I have is and I can get that to, I guess you, maybe Linda, or I can send it to Tina, either one of you. But there's like a direct link, and I'm actually looking, right at it right now. I have the link for, the fundraiser is all sitting, all the information for the fundraiser is just sitting on our Give Lively.
I
That's our
found it.
thing. Yeah. And that's where it's all sitting. Yeah, there it is. Yep. And then with that, so that's why I chose that platform. A person has the ability, actually, there's a thing that you'll see on the page, you'll see the funding levels and all that, but there's also a thing on there that says, I want to raise money for this and stuff. So you can see that. And we of course welcome anybody that wants to do that. So you can be fundraising for us and be basically an ally in that way also, and everything else, and which I would greatly appreciate. We would greatly
Liz is
appreciate that also.
very, very persuasive. So yes, that would be great.
I want to say a couple of things before I know we'll close shortly. There's a saying I have, and it's a quote from someone, that's all it takes for evil to triumph in the world is for good people to say do nothing.
Yep.
And that's what we need. People who are allies need to do something when they see acts of racism, and you have to deal with your own personal safety and things like that. You should say something. And I'm not saying you ruin a social evening out with your white friends who may bring up things, and it might ruin the evening. It's much like a friend of mine, who's white female, who said she retired psychiatrist, said they didn't talk politics anymore because most of her friends were supporters of the previous president. But I think we have to do that. Now, I have a pet peeve, and I should share that with you. There's a word that I abhor, and that's the word minority. I constantly tell people I am not a minority. So I do not like to be referred to as a minority. Imagine here's a kid, and you tell a kid you're a minority, you're less than. Imagine what that does to a kid psychologically. I understand why it's being done politically, but I just want to let you know so you can begin thinking about that word. I do not like to be referred to as a minority. I'm African American, I'm Black. If you call me that, that's fine. And that's part of our language, which has been, stipulated by others, by those in Congress or by those in legislative body, that they chose to call people whatever they want, disadvantaged, minority, handicap, you name it, or whatever word they want, because they have the power to do so. Having the power is the power to stipulate definitions. So it's just a thought for you.
Yeah. I will co-sign on that and say that I don't like when I went to, had tried to have an event last year in the county. And just because it was, I guess, because I'm guessing that it was because we had a number of African Americans who were going to be there, self included. And the organizers called extra people to come. These are again county officials, county employees, called and stacked the venue with extra people in it, which interfered then with our ability for how many people we had invited to come to it. We couldn't get, because there were limits to how many people could come. And I found out later on and was told that they had brought extra people because they thought we were there to riot.
Wow.
When we had a framed, I have a framed museum quality piece that has Hezekiah Brown on it, that our organization spent good money to get from a museum quality place that has all this history about him as the original integrator of schools and everything else, that we wanted to install in one of the county buildings. It's sitting in my place because we didn't give it. We ended up taking it home because they treated us so badly and they thought they were there. And for some reason, it's just like we were there to celebrate. When did celebrating become rioting? Oh, because it's Black people? Oh gosh, okay. That's just a whole other level of just, that's the kind of stuff my family left York, Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised. We left there because we came here thinking, I didn't think I'd be dealing with things like this. But here I'm dealing with stuff like this in the county that I love. So I just tell people, am I a patriot? Well, the definition of patriot is you're doing what you do because you love your country. Well, I guess I am a patriot then. Not the kind that I think you think, this person that was saying that to me. But these are the things that we have and everything. And we just keep it moving and everything. That's what we're supposed to do, right? Smile. We can't say anything. You're not supposed to, because then you'll be called this if you do whatever. It's just, I just want to do history. I just want it to be accurate. I want the kids to hear the right thing. I want the next generation to be, more critical thinking skills. And I want us to start dealing with things in the county and everything else the way that, I get the whole choose civility and everything and stuff, but it shouldn't be to the extent that we can't actually have conversations that, yes, might sound like it's disagreement and everything and stuff. That's how things get hashed out. Disagreements become not. If you don't address them, then they just get kicked down the can gets kicked down the road. And that's just in general what I think from my perspective, my humble opinion of what it is that I see, from the time ever since I've moved here when I was in middle school.
I remember the generation, I picketed, I sat in, all that kind of stuff, because I grew up in a segregated society. So 64, the Civil Rights Act.
All right, I'm going to pause. I thought I was going to pause the recording before, but I'm pausing it now. I